Hi everyone, this is the demo video for the glass painting challenge. You can see my painting back there, and this was my still life setup. There is also a full-length mixing demo video as well. If you're working from one of the references that I'm providing, you can follow along and mix as I mix. I will encourage you, no matter the reference you're using, whether that's one of the photos or even your own still life that you're setting up at home, to pre-mix your values and colors, and that can make you feel a little bit more free as you start your paintings. So the challenge with a glass object like this mug, in my painting it contains coffee, now that coffee has been consumed, so the challenge with glass is to really focus on the values and the colors that you're actually seeing. So you're looking for what the values and colors are there. You're thinking, what are those individual little shapes that you're seeing? And you want to, if you can, almost try to forget that you're painting glass, because the idea of painting glass can be kind of scary. It's a little bit intimidating. But if you remember to think of asking yourself, what are the values that I'm seeing? What are the colors that I'm actually seeing? You're going to be seeing colors come through the glass from the other things that it's surrounded by. So keep those things in mind. A big thing with a painting challenge like this as well is thinking about how the different parts of light and shadow are behaving. And what's essential with both glass objects and sort of metallic reflective objects is that the highlights, the brightest part of the light, are going to be very sharp and they're going to really stand out. So you're going to want to think of edges. So where different value shapes and color shapes meet, right? And oftentimes with a highlight, in order for that highlight to really appear sharp, to have that crisp edge, well, the other things around it might need to be softened, right? So that's going to be a big thing for you to consider as you start this challenge. So in this video, you'll see my entire painting process, okay? And I'll be talking about that as you watch the time lapse. There will also be a brief period in the video where I'm just going over some paint application, so that's in real time. And at the end of the video, we're going to circle back around, talk about some different parts of this painting, and also talk about setting up your own still lifes at home and things that you're going to want to consider for that. All right, let's get started on the painting. I'm starting out by mapping in my composition using Vine Charcoal. Vine Charcoal has a low tinting capacity and can be erased with the swipe of a hand, making it a good medium for laying in painting compositions. Avoid using graphite. Graphite tends to rise through paint layers. No matter your subject, ask yourself, what are the simple shapes I'm seeing here? Map in those forms. Pay attention to the placement of things and to the edges of your canvas. It is much easier to fix awkward compositions in the drawing layer with Vine Charcoal than in subsequent layers of paint. Begin by working from dark to light and from general to specific. I'm establishing my major shadow shapes first and blocking in general information. With painting a glass object, you are dealing with several layers of information at once. What is behind the glass, and can you see that coming through? Map out that background information first. Those background colors and values will be coming through the glass and will lay the foundation that other details will be built on top of. As you are working, really pay attention to the colors and values you are actually observing. Let go of the idea of painting glass and clearly observe the visual information before you. In this first pass, I'm blocking in all of the major values and colors. When painting glass, you're taking in a lot of visual information. It can be tempting to try to get into some really detailed passages right away. Instead, try to establish a big general statement. Back away from your painting, see if that general statement is reading. Once you've established that solid foundation, then come back to your details. Begin finessing paint application and subtle variations in color and value. Begin considering your edges. Highlights on glass objects tend to go incredibly bright and sharp. To make that highlight read as sharp, you may have to soften surrounding edges. Okay everyone, I'm pausing the time lapse for a bit to go over how I'm applying the paint here. So you can see throughout the time lapse that I'm beginning by blocking in all of the major values, starting from dark going into light. So blocking in all of those major values and colors. And I'm just trying to get all of that information down so I can see what I'm working with. Now and this is kind of the glory of oil painting. This is all still wet, it's all still malleable, and I can go back in and see where I want to adjust edges. So edges are where blocks of color or blocks of value are coming up next to each other, right? And I can see maybe where I might want to soften some edges. So I have one of my brushes, I'm getting the paint out of that. I definitely want to soften this right here. The coffee has this darker value towards the top of the kind of liquid where the liquid is meeting the foam, but it gets quite soft on this side of it. So I want to go in and start to blend that out. So I have my paper towel handy, and I'm just very softly going in and blending out that edge. So you can, I'm kind of barely raking the surface with my brush. Okay, and I'm even gonna soften just the whole thing a little bit. Okay, I want that value there, and I put it in with these kind of decisive strokes to begin with, but now I can go back in and decide what areas I want to soften a little bit. And that becomes especially important to consider in an object like this where we're dealing with glass, because like I've said before, the highlights go both very intense in their brightness and value, but they're also very sharp. But in order for the highlight to read as sharp, other things around it have to go softer, right? So I'm even going to go into these other areas surrounding my highlights. I don't want to get rid of the values and colors that I've put there, but I want to soften those edges so that the highlights will read as super sharp. So this becomes a really good lesson in paint application, and also in how much context matters in a painting. Sometimes you're looking at something and sort of trying to figure out, okay, why is this looking off? And it may not be the thing that you initially think it is, right? So maybe you're thinking, my highlights don't look sharper, let me try to keep going back in and make them sharper. Well, it might not be that the highlights, that the way that you've applied the highlights, it might not be that that isn't sharp enough, but maybe everything else is too sharp. So you don't have the contrast in edges to make that sharpness read. So sometimes the very thing you need to adjust is the thing that you're not initially thinking of. Okay, so start by blocking in all of your values, get all that information down. You don't have to, as you go, try to make everything perfect, okay? In fact, with these homework assignments, the idea is that you're learning how to quickly block in value and color and get that all down, and then you can come back in and make adjustments and soften or sharpen things as needed, okay? And that's especially possible in oil painting where the surface is going to stay malleable for some time. So practice blocking in and then take a pause and start to assess how you have applied the paint and areas where you can make that adjustment, and think of those various ways of contrast. So contrast can apply to value, color, but it can also apply to things like edges. In these final stages of my painting, I'm revisiting values that need to be intensified and building up my details. Check the various parts of the shadow and light family in your painting. Are your occlusion shadows and core shadows reading? Can you identify the areas of reflected light, and are they picking up the surrounding color? Look for areas that you can soften and other areas that you can sharpen. This play between soft and sharp helps build focus within a work. All right, so here is my finished glass object quick study painting. So quick study, I'm doing this in a couple of hours. I'm making fairly quick decisions about the values and colors. I'm trying to capture those accurately. You could see in my painting demo that I begin by kind of blocking everything in fairly quickly. I'm working from dark to light. And once I've kind of established that foundation of all the different values and colors, then I can go back in and start to readjust some of those edges and the paint application. And also go back into areas once I've started those adjustments and decide, okay, maybe I want this highlight to stand out more. I'm gonna add thicker, crisper paint to make that highlight really read, okay? So let's talk about a couple of things. This is on a panel. You can do these quick study paintings on any of your small canvases. That could be canvas pad. This was part of the Gamblin color paint set kit. It came inside of a panel, so I used that panel for this little homework assignment. You'll notice if you haven't worked on panel before and you use your panel, that it's very kind of slippery. It has a very different feeling from painting on canvas. One isn't necessarily better than the other. You might just end up deciding as for yourself as an artist, as a painter, what you kind of like. I enjoy working on things that have a little bit more texture. Panel is fun too, but that's just kind of a personal preference thing that as you paint more, you're going to be able to kind of decide what you're into with that. Okay, another thing. So again, I pre-mixed all of my values and colors. I really like doing that and taking the time to do that, because then when I go to paint, I have a sense of freedom to be expressive with my paint application. I'm not having to every single step sort of think, how do I mix this value? How do I mix this color? Because I've already kind of laid that groundwork. So with your projects, I want you to get into that practice and really try it out for this semester. Do that pre-mixing, take the time. See if you like it. I think you're going to like it. You might not, but it's a good thing to be aware of, to know how to do. And I'm always going to be providing you with those mixing demos so you can see the decisions that I'm making. When I mix this yellow, for example, I added the complementary color to get the shadow area, so that's purple. So you can think back to when we studied color, the color wheel, color theory in beginning painting. That knowledge is going to let you know how to mix your shadows, for example. You can take the complement, add it into whatever color you're trying to develop shadows for. Okay, so that's the painting. You have your glass or reflective object. Your highlights, bright lights should be crisp and clear. They can also be thicker. And sometimes to make that crispness or that sharpness really show up, you need to soften the things around it. So that becomes a way of thinking about another form of contrast. So often with contrast, we'll think of value, dark and light, right? To make something appear lighter, you can put it on a dark background. Well, to make something appear sharper, you can soften the things around it. So that's something to keep in mind with this. And with oil painting, what's particularly great about working in oil is that you can block in everything, you can take your time, then you can go back in, and you'll want to do this in one sitting, but you can go back in and you can adjust edges. You have hours and hours to do that, so that's really nice. All right, before I end the video, I do want to talk about one more thing. So even with these quick studies, you never know when someone is going to end up loving even just your quick study and might want to get it. So even with these shorter homework assignments, you can still be thinking, how do I make this nice and presentable, right? So the box panel is really cool. And then I put on the side, I'm putting purple on the side, complement of yellow. So I'm thinking of that color theory. You wouldn't have to do purple. That's just a decision I'm making because I wanted that complement. I mixed this with alizarin crimson and phthalo green. Gives you a nice, beautiful, fairly neutral purple. You could have bring yellow on that side too. But you can start to think, okay, what about the sides of my canvas or my panel? How do I make that look nice too? Okay, so that's another thing over the course of the semester we're going to want to start to develop and to consider making your work presentable, okay? All right, last thing, now this is truly the last thing, I just wanted to talk about setup a little bit. So you can see I've set up my own still life. I have this small table. I built a fairly simple armature in order to have this drapery. If any of you have questions about that, I can give you that whole process, okay? I have my glass object, and then the way that I lit it, which I was lighting it from the side in order to get a distinctive light side and shadow side and to be able to handle those shapes easily, I was lighting it with just my desk lamp. So you can use what you have available to you and it doesn't have to be super complicated to make nice scenarios. What you do want to avoid is just purely overhead lighting. That's probably not going to give you very distinctive light shapes and shadow shapes to work with. It can be difficult to pull that off in a painting and have it look interesting. So if you can, strive to get some of that side lighting or lighting that you can control and be making that choice. You can also get a clamp like this. This clamp light is incredibly useful. I also use it to light my painting area, and I have a natural sort of balanced light bulb in here so that when I'm painting, the light isn't overly warm and I'm not registering my painting as warmer than it actually is. So if you can, painting in natural light, so either, you know, the light from your window is great, but if you don't have, if you're painting at night, you can get a natural LED light bulb, and so it's essentially like, kind of like a white light, and that is going to make your color read accurately as you're painting. All right, so those are a few little tips, and if you have any questions, as always, I say this at the end of every video, but if you have any questions, just feel free to reach out.